Hello and good evening. Thank you for joining me today for this short Year 11 webinar, the purpose of which is to give you a little bit of an overview of what you can expect in Year 11 this year for your child. My name's Steve Rudall. I am the Director of Middle School here at West Island, so that's Years 10 and 11. Unfortunately, James Donald, our Head of Year, can't join us tonight, but I will reference him throughout the webinar, and hopefully you're all aware of James's role as head of year, and he's another really important contact for us. So the purpose of the webinar today then is to have a little look through what's going to happen in year 11 for your students. So hopefully coming up on the screen soon should be the overview of the webinar. You have to bear with me. We've had a couple of technical issues in the year 10 version of this, so we're going to try something slightly different. So the plan today then is to look through a few key dates for all of year 11, just so that you can plan ahead and help your child in terms of what they need to be aware of. I'll give a little overview of GCSEs. Your child's been studying GCSEs and BTEC level 2s for the last year, but it's a good opportunity just to remind what's coming up for them. I'll talk through again feedback cycles and transcript grades, but again, these are things that you might have encountered, but maybe just had a few questions around throughout the course of year 10. And then the focus is going to be on how can we support year 11 students at this really, really important juncture with both mock exams and revision for that, but also making their choices for post-16 study and options further ahead. And then finally, I want to finish the webinar with just some general advice. And if you're in the year 10 one, then apologies, because the advice was so good in year 10 that we're going to repeat it in year 11 about how to support your child throughout their year 11 journey, both academically and socially. So VJ, next slide, please. So key dates then for this year. So on the 24th of September, we have our higher education team, so led by Michael Hirsch, but I'll show you the rest of them later on, have organised a university fair. This is where universities from around the world will be coming in to present at West Island. So we'll have some really prestigious universities from the US, from the UK, also European ones, and universities from Hong Kong. This is a really good opportunity for year 11s to have a good talk with universities about potential pathways, thinking about, well, what would be the right subjects for them to choose? What sort of pathways maybe they haven't thought about? So I really urge them to take this really, really seriously. We have our options process, which has already really begun for the year 11s. They had their first introductory assembly to pathways last day 5, so that was last week. Coming up on the 11th of September, you're going to see me again, hopefully, for our options webinar. And that's where Mr. Vine Costa, our head of DP, and Mr. Collins, our head of CP, will be talking through the different pathways on offer at West Island School. After that, children will have an opportunity to have a go at some of the new subjects. So there's a whole raft of new subjects that you're going to find out about on the 11th. Subjects such as my own one, global politics, which I will have never studied before. We'll put on a little taster session for them so they kind of have a little bit more information before making their choices. When it comes to option choices, there's 2 big days to bear in mind. One is on the 3rd of November, where we're going to have an options afternoon, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And then on the 9th of December, where the final choices for their post-16 options are made. In between that, we've got the year 11 mock exams. They run from the 22nd of October to the 31st of October, and that would be after the half-term break. You can see down below some dates that probably the year 11s are more excited about. So provisionally, we've got the end of pre-16 recognition, formally titled graduation, but we're going to call year 13 graduation because that's when they graduate the school, and we're going to recognise that they're finishing their pre-16 journey probably on the 16th of April. That's one day before the last teaching day for year 11 on the 17th of April. And then again, provisionally, because this does depend a little bit on hotel bookings and also the final exam timetable, the year 11 formal, which I know they're looking forward to, and they're calling it a prom, which I think is very American, on the 18th of June. So moving on, VJ, next slide, please. GCSEs then are the courses that your children have been studying for the last year. Some of you may be very aware of what GCSEs are, so this is just a sort of reminder of them. GCSEs are a British qualification, stands for the General Certificate of Secondary Education. And at West Island School, we do international GCSEs, hence the I, and students do probably typically between about 7 and 9 of them. GCSE courses run for 2 years. So they started them this time last year in year 10. And the final examinations, external examinations for GCSEs will be in May 2026. So those examinations will be on content that they will have studied from all the way back in year 10, all the way through to year 11. So when we start to talk about revision strategies, it's obviously really important that they've got good strategies in place because there's a lot of content to be aware of. We are really successful at West Island. Last year's cohort got just close to 60% of them achieved a level 7 to 9, or in old money, an A star and A. And depending on what course your child is doing, will depend on what exam board. So some exam boards take EdXL, which is graded on a 9 to 1 scale, 9 being A star. And some courses do Cambridge, and that is graded on A star to U. I can see a question about mock oral exams. So the languages department will send out a timetable of the mock oral exams that will coincide probably a little bit before, and some of them maybe a little bit after the other mock exams. Generally, the mock exams in October will be focused mostly on the exams that they sit in the exam hall, the written exams. Okay, let me just try and move on. So alongside GCSEs, which are obviously very exam-based, we also have 62% of our students currently taking BTECs in year 10, and just a bit less than that, just over 50% in year 11. BTECs are also a British qualification, but the difference here with BTECs is that you will have noticed that your child is doing lots of coursework style projects. So BTECs don't have big external exams in May 2026. Instead, for over the course of 2 years, they have internally graded controlled coursework. And so it's really important if they are studying the BTECs that they're staying on top of their BTEC courses. Courses in BTECs have another different grading system. They go from pass all the way up to distinction star, which is the equivalent of 2 A star GCSEs. Next slide, please, BJ. So that's the courses that they're doing. And how they're assessed, obviously, is externally. However, we need to, or we would like to keep a track of how your child is doing so we can help with intervention where necessary and celebration, hopefully, all the time. So you will have noticed in year 10 that your child's report has 2 different grades. They've got a feedback cycle grade and a transcript grade. So over the course of year 10 and 11, they have 6 feedback cycle grades. And the purpose of a feedback cycle is to try and reflect how the child is getting on during that short period of time. So they're roughly 2 to 3 months. So we would expect the feedback cycle grades maybe to fluctuate a little bit. It might be that in one feedback cycle for a course that they're doing something that maybe is a little bit more accessible. Maybe it's something that they're building on that they've done before, and they might perform really, really well. But it might be that they do something the next unit of feedback, next feedback cycle, where it's maybe a bit tougher, they need a bit more help on it, and it might be that you see the feedback cycle grade possibly go down, or vice versa, go up. That's fine because that gives us lots of good data about maybe where we need to focus revision on. But for you as parents, when you're thinking how to help your children at home, it's really important to talk through these grades. If they've done really well, celebrate that, but also find out, well, what was going on there that meant that you were doing so well. Alongside the feedback cycle grades, though, these grades that might change a little bit, you have the transcript grades. And these were introduced at the behest of our higher educations team, who want to give our students as good an opportunity as possible if they're going to apply for a US university, because these universities look at their grades transcripts all the way back to year 10. So the transcript grade is one that's not meant to fluctuate very much. These grades are set by the teachers and they are based on a few things. So it would be based on data, so things like their Yellis test, but also individual subject assessments, the overall sort of holistic performance, but also our teachers are very, very experienced. The sort of profile of a child, if they've seen a similar profile of a child, what sort of transcript grade, what's the grade that you would expect them to get at the end of the course. So the transcript grade might be a bit higher than the feedback cycle grade because maybe they're performing at a certain level with their feedback cycles because that's partway through the course, but we would expect them to make likely progress towards a higher transcript grade. During the course of year 11, there's two feedback cycles. The first one is after the mock exams, and the second one is on the 30th of January. There was a question that came up about a possible further mock exam because the mock exams are in October this year rather than December of last year. That's not going to happen, but what will probably happen during term 2 to give us as much data as possible and also prepare students for exams is they will still be doing subject-based assessments. Next slide, please, VJ. And so these subject-based assessments can be a lot for students. If they're studying, 8 or 9 GCSEs during the course of a feedback cycle, that might mean that they're doing 8 or 9 different assessments. And obviously, that's going to cause quite a lot of stress and anxiety. So what we're trying to do this year is manage that as best as we can. We can't alleviate it completely, and a little bit of stress can sometimes be good because it helps to prepare them for those final exams in May, June, which are quite stressful. However, what we have is our assessment and deadlines calendar, and this has been shared with students, and I think it's been shared with parents too. But if you'd like to see it, the link will be put into these slides, which will be shared with you. And on this, you can see where individual subjects are planning different assessments. I think this is a really useful tool when you're thinking about how you can support your child at home, because you can talk through, right, next week you have a science test, and then you can start to help them to prepare, what content you expect is going to be in that test, and make sure that they're directing their time in the right way, rather than maybe a bit of last minute preparation. Next slide, please, Vij. In terms of preparing and working at home, year 11s at the moment are probably thinking very much about their mock exams, but they're still probably getting some home learning for subjects. We have a home learning timetable. The expectation is that they are probably getting 30, where they get home learning set, it should be lasting between 30 to 45 minutes per subject. Home learning might not always be set though. So you can see here, so for example, today was day 3, I believe, and they might have science homework and what they had for their period 3 lesson. However, if they don't have that home learning, that's not necessarily because the teachers decided that they don't want to set home learning. It might be because there's no home learning that they feel would enhance their learning. So we're not encouraging home learning that's busy work or something that maybe is just finishing off things that they should be doing in class. However, for year 11, we've trying to equip them with study skills. And so maybe if they don't have a great deal of home learning, please encourage them, be revising, keeping on top of their things, self-managing. VJ, next step, please. So, VJ, would you mind going forward one more, please? And then coming back to this, thank you. So when it comes to revising, we want to talk about some effective revision strategies. There are loads and loads of different strategies out there that you could have a look at. But I think 4 that I would really, as an educator, suggest are things that I've seen historically worked really well, are these 4. First of all, a space practice. So sitting down in a room and working for 2 hours at one particular subject is not an effective way of revising. To try to avoid cognitive overload, when it comes to preparing for mock exams, work with your child to think about, what's your revision timetable look like? And it should be where they've got revision of 20 to 30-minute chunks of different things, where they're spacing up and they're breaking their revision up to avoid cognitive overload. So make sure there's space practice, and I sort of dropped in there that I think a revision timetable is a really, really useful tool, both for them to keep themselves organized, but also for you to see what they're doing. Something that some students like, but it doesn't work for all, is dual coding. This is where you might take an original idea And then you would maybe bullet point the notes, but then turn it into something. So you're trying to dual code in your brain what that bit of information might be like. For me, something that I always recommend as a history teacher, where a very content-heavy subject would be bullet points, and then putting these bullet points onto flashcards where they drill and they refine their knowledge. I've seen some students walking around, I think they were in year 12 today with some flashcards, brilliant stuff. And the best ones and the best revision I find is always handwritten. I think that's for two reasons. One, that handwriting helps to encode the information better into their brains, but also handwriting is a physical exercise. And when they come to do their exams, they're going to be sat there for maybe an hour and a half, possibly 2 hours, and they're going to be handwriting for that length of time. So it's about training that muscle memory. Next slide, please, Vij. Sorry, can we go to the next one after that? Yep, and then back up to options. So when it comes to revision, obviously we're not expecting children to know everything straight away. Mr. Donald has offered up 4 different revision opportunities every Thursday, and he's going to be running these in the G&A area. So we are letting the year 11s know about this. We're advertising it, but also if you think it would be a good idea, if they maybe need a bit of extra help, if they're struggling with getting started on revision or with strategies, then please encourage them to be going to these. Okay, VJ, can we go back up to options, please? Okay, so that's the sort of academic stuff and options and assessment. But alongside this, in this really busy term, like I said, year 11s are making their post-16 options choices. I've tried to show on this slide, as simply as my brain would allow it, the process for options, because there are quite a lot of stages to try and make sure we get this process right. The post-16 options process started in August, where students had the introduction assembly from Miss Divine Costa and Mr. Collins. Right now, we're encouraging students in their Learning for Life lessons to look into the right pathways for them. So I've got year 11 Yuan tomorrow. Part of that lesson is that I'm going to ask them to explore the post-16 site alongside their Unifrog work that they've been doing to try to think about what the subjects they're interested in and what would be the right pathway for them. Throughout the whole options process, we're trying to get the message across that the right pathway for each student is the one that is right for them, which sounds very simple, but sometimes isn't necessarily one that they would follow. On the 11th of September, as I mentioned, we have a parent webinar. That is going to be lots and lots of information about different pathways. Again, I appreciate this is quite a lot of information overload. It will be recorded, and the same with that parent webinar. And so that's a chance to have an idea about, well, what are the different options available to your child? On the 3rd of November, though, I think that's the more important date for your diaries, which is where we're going to open up the school and bring you in, hopefully, to discuss different options pathways with the teachers. So that'll be in the afternoon on the 3rd of November. We'll have a discussion about the different pathways, opportunities to meet individual subjects, faculty talks, and the opportunity to tour some of our facilities, because things like our design facility is amazing, some university level equipment in there where we want to make sure that students know that they've got all these different choices available to them. So you'll be coming in, the students will be coming with you as well. And we want you to come into that really open-mindedly so that you've got an idea about maybe what might be some good choices, but that's a chance to refine them. And then finally, the final options choices are made on the 9th of December. That's not necessarily the end of the story, though, because you might make these options choices and they're probably going to be, they might feel right, but we want to make sure that it's the right decision for everyone. So the higher education team then during term 2 will be reaching out to everybody for individual student-parent meetings. That's where you come into school for 15 to 20 minutes to talk through with one of higher education counsellors the different options choices you've made and the potential pathways for them. So that's our options process. It's quite a lengthy process, but we want to make sure it's done right. VJ, if we could go down a little bit now. Okay, I can see there's a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to deal with those at the end if that's okay, because it's just me, so I'm going to go back and forth otherwise. A couple of little policy things, and I'm going to go fairly quickly over these. So at West Island, we really, really want to encourage positive behaviour. It was James and I, it's a message that we're trying to give to students every single day that at West Island, students are kind. At West Island, we support each other. But sometimes we step out and we make a mistake. And that's where last year we introduced our sanctions ladder, where you can see there are different levels depending on the behaviour. Generally, with 98% of the time, I find we never using this with year 11, but I think it's useful to share this information to show that there is a pathway when it comes to certain behaviors. What I would like to emphasize, though, is the positive things that we're trying to encourage. So we also obviously have a credit system that if you've been in school since year seven, probably your child was super excited about in year seven, but they might have become maybe a bit more of an apathetic teenager since then, and credits aren't necessarily as motivating. What we have introduced this year are postcards, which are based around the learner profile, which is our IB 10 attributes from things like caring to being open-minded to being risk takers. And these postcards, teachers are writing them to students and they're trying to pick out particular things that students are doing really, really well on. So it might be that your child comes back with a postcard that says, in maths today, they were really, really knowledgeable. And that was signed by Mr. Turner, my favorite maths teacher. And so if you see one of these, just really, really, really celebrate it with your child. It means they're doing an absolutely great job. One other thing, the sort of elephant in the room, the phone policy. Year 10 and 11 are brilliant at that, I think, really. But just to let you know, we introduced the phone policy last year. I think we did a lot of consultation with parents and students on it. It's a very simple policy. Students don't have their mobile devices out in school. And if they are seen, then the teacher will ask them politely to hand over their phone, which is then stored in a locked box in reception and then given back at the end of the day. We found that at the very start, when we introduced that policy, we were taking maybe like 50 phones a day. Now I think Audrey in reception gets maybe 5 or 6. And the positive that we've seen is the engagement between students is so much better, particularly in those sort of social times. So again, when it comes to self-management and mobile phones, I think our students are doing a really great job there. BJ, next slide, please. Okay, so everyone needs a little bit of support every now and then, and we have great support systems within school. I've mentioned that you're going to have a one-on-one meeting with the higher education team. Just to put some names to some faces to names there, we've got 3 higher education counsellors. They are Michael, Srijita, and Yelena. Depending on what dynasty your child is in, they're paired up with one of these higher education counsellors. And then Neha, who's our amazing admin support, will be reaching out and setting up those meetings with you. Please, please, please use them. They've got a vast amount of experience. Srijita was touring the US this summer and checking out lots and lots of different universities and opportunities there. And I think there's a university tour, Horizons Week as well, which Michael is leading to the UK this year. So they've got huge experience of universities, both UK, US, but also some lesser known destinations. So last year we put children in universities in Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and of course lots of our students go to Hong Kong too. Alongside this, for our social and emotional needs, we have a really strong counselling team. So they're led by Saffron, who's our wellbeing coordinator, Katrina, who's been our counsellor here for many years, Charlotte, who works with the Aberdeen Social Welfare, and we've got a new counsellor this year, so that's why he's got a slightly nicer headshot than the others, Akshit, who's joined again as part of the Aberdeen Welfare provision. And so the counselling team is really, really important, I think, for our students. Growing up and navigating teenagehood is really tough. And when they need to, students can book in with a counsellor and they can have a session with them. So we have a lot of support in terms of external people they can go to. Students also have their tutoring system, so they have their morning registration, and also every day 4 period 3, the 2 dynasties get together, and that's led by one of the 2 dynasty tutors, and they have something called pulse time, which is an individual check-in, which will happen at some point during the year, maybe once or twice for each student. And so the idea of that is that we're trying to get as many conversations with them one-on-one to find out how they're getting on. Of course, on top of that, you've got Mr. Donald, who has a fantastic relationship with all the children and myself. And if there's anything that you ever need, please feel free to reach out to any of us. Okay. Next up then. So last two slides, and then I'll go to questions, and I'll leave any questions QR code up for questions that you might want to write in. So apologies if you're in the year 10 one, and hopefully this has been a bit technically better than that one. So your child as a teenager is going to experience lots of social and emotional challenges, and that is completely normal. I think how we can support them, though, is to understand when they're experiencing those challenges and maybe what some signs are. So if you notice that they're maybe more irritable, they're sleepless, they've got a lack of appetite, at the first instance, check in with them, see how they're getting on. Is there anything that's causing anxiety? Let us know as well. Keep the communication channels open. I've talked a lot about options, mock exams, feedback grades, all this sort of thing. And obviously, academics is really, really important. We want them all to get to the best destinations possible. But at the same time, they're not going to get there unless they have an opportunity sometimes to switch off and just make sure that they are powering down sometimes from all the pressure that might be put on there. So please make sure that you're encouraging your child, have a healthy mix of academics and non-academics, engage in the CAS program, sports, everything like that. And as well as that, have a digital detox. So they might spend quite a lot of time, maybe at school or in the evening, doing homework on their laptop or maybe on their mobile phone. It's really healthy to just have some time blocked out in the day just to have that detox to try to provide a healthy balance. And then I think just being aware that sometimes something that might seem like the end of the world for a teenager. So it could be, a friendship issue or maybe a grade on a test that seems like it's the worst thing to have ever happened. Well, yes, teenagers do tend to overreact, but it is a normal teenage reaction. So rather than overreacting to their overreaction, really try to validate them, to normalize what they're saying, use supportive language, tell me about that, how you feel after getting that grade. That sounds really tough. Tell me more. What can we build in terms of support? And like I said, we have a big team here. We're all here. We're all trying to pull in the same direction to do the best for your child. So please keep in touch with us, either the counselling team led by Saffron, James, or myself, and keep the lines of communication open. Next slide, please, Peach. And then academically, of course, academics are really important, particularly in the run up to the mock exams and then the external exams. So try to talk to them about what's going on in their academics and their day generally. Look at their timetables, think about what subjects they've done, ask them what they've done in that subject, try to get them down to the nitty-gritties, to the specifics. So if they said, "Oh, what did you do today?" "Oh, I did English." Well, what did you do in English? What novel are you reading at the moment? What are you learning about that novel? What techniques are you trying to practice? Because all of that is really good at helping them to sort of recall the information they've done throughout the day, but also giving you an idea of how you can support them. What we're aiming for is by the time that they graduate West Island School and go out into the world, is that children are independent. So part of our job is trying to make sure that they don't need us anymore. And so, as well as supporting them in terms of making sure that they are doing the right things, try to support them towards independence. So make sure that they're maybe taking ownership of their revision schedule, that they're taking ownership of the way in which they're preparing for their mock exams, or they're taking ownership of their post-16 options choices, because those are the choices that they're going to be sat with. There are, of course, lots and lots of bits of advice out there. West Island, we've set up a few years ago a revision website that's got lots of information from different faculties about how to revise, alongside some other generic things about good revision strategies, and the link is there. And make sure you read through the action plans that your children write, particularly after their mock exams feedback cycle, because that'll give us you a really good idea about how they're reflecting on their learning, what they feel is going really well, but also maybe what they need some help with. And again, use us for support. reach out to their individual teachers. If there's something that they're not sure about in a lesson, or there's maybe a unit of work that they're struggling with, contact the teacher. And the teacher will, you know, put them in the right direction, maybe offer them a bit of support, maybe a lunchtime or a break time catch up. Talk to James and talk to myself too. So that is the end of my material. VJ, if you can skip on to the next slide, please. If you've got any questions that you want to ask that you'd like me to answer in a bit more of a lengthy written format, please scan the QR code and hopefully that will work. I'm just going to work through a couple of questions that have come up that I can hopefully answer for people verbally that have come up through the course of the webinar. So from one person said, will the curriculum be completed in time for the mock exams? No, it won't be, because the curriculum, the courses are 2-year courses. But the purpose of the mock exams is not to test the whole raft of the curriculum, because otherwise we would have to have our mock exams in May or June of the year that they take them. The purpose of mock exams is very much practice. So practice in 2 ways. Practice of being in that sort of high pressure, high stakes examination environment, because none of our students have sat in an exam hall with 120 other students around them taking a test before. So that's really important to alleviate that anxiety. And completing the mock exams a bit earlier in October helps us to normalize that and helps us to be able to intervene a little bit more. The other aspect of practice is just practicing what they've done. They've already had 3 terms of year 10 plus half a term of year 11. So that is a lot of content. Probably most subjects are up to about 70% of their content that they've covered. And so it's a chance to practice that content and practice the skills of revision. I appreciate the first aid revision session might clash with CAS. And say, for example, Rashmi, that your student Anushka was doing MUA and CAS. I'm sure if they ask their CAS leader, that would be me, I'd be happy for her to go to revision sessions. And I'm sure any CAS leader, if your child said, right, I'd like to go to revision sessions this week, but I'll be back next week, that's absolutely fine. We know they're in year 11. We know there's a lot of demands on their time. Another question about final options for post-16. Is it possible to change them after they've been submitted? So final options are submitted on the 9th of December, and that gives us a really good indication of what most students are going to take, and it helps us to formulate things like timetabling and staffing. But after you've had those discussions with the higher education counsellors, it might be that we decide that actually, well, something's not necessarily a good fit. It might be that your child is an exceptional mathematician, but they've chosen to do SL AI mathematics and SL biology, when maybe HL AA mathematics and HL physics would be a much better fit for them. So there will be some options, some opportunities to change, and that'll be a sort of conversation between yourselves and the higher education team. And the final question on there regarding mock exams, do children have to attend regular lessons during mock exam days? No. So to give them the sort of most authentic experience of exams, they are on what's called study leave for the period of their mock exam. So they will come in to do their mock exam, and then they will either choose to stay and study in the library, or they can go home. So if they have, say, for example, an exam that starts at 11 a.m., they don't need to be in school at 8 o'clock. They can stay at home and they can revise at home, or they can come in and they can study in the library. But they won't have regular lessons during the mock exams. So that, I think, covers all of the questions. There were 2 quite similar ones about the mock exam timing. Thank you for giving up your time tonight to come and see me. I hope that wasn't too much information overload. And these slides and this webinar will be shared with you. And I hope to see all of you in 8 days' time in another webinar about post-16 choices, where there'll be a lot more information there. Thank you very much. Goodbye.